It is Friday, January the 7th. I am your host, Jon Cohen, covering the news in our nation this week from sea to shining sea. Well, we waited. We waited with bated breath as the President of the United States, Joe Biden, announced that he would be commemorating the one-year anniversary of January the 6th. And we knew from the very minute that this was announced that it was going to be an absolute bleep show. And we waited. And we waited, and we waited some more. And what we were greeted with was basically a propaganda-filled show that, even though the Golden Globes have been canceled, Nancy Pelosi should have honestly won, Best Actress for a Comedy by hosting this thing. It just was unbelievable because the Democrats, as we knew they would not, did not disappoint. So yesterday, we were watching television, and suddenly, the transmission, like the Outer Limits, the transmission was interrupted with dramatic music as we cut to Statuary Hall in the Capitol with the chyron, attack on the Capitol 1 year later. And then with eager and unbridled anticipation, we watched Beavis and Butthead enter to make their respective speeches. And I must say, it's really amazing that the vice president is so useless at this point that she has basically been relegated to the opening act for Joe Biden at speeches. And this is what our esteemed Vice President Kamala Harris had to say in her opening remarks.
Echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault. Dates that occupy not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. And January 6th, 2021.
Don't you see, guys? Don't you see? A bunch of rednecks and moronic fools storming the Capitol for a few hours, taking selfies, swinging from the rafters, tipping over trash cans, defecating in the halls. That's the same as 2,403 soldiers and people dying at Pearl Harbor, or 2,996 people being killed on 9/11. The melodramatic comparisons that Democrats constantly employ is absolutely mesmerizing. Like the time when Joe Biden compared the Georgia voting laws to Jim Crow. But that's the way talking points are administered by Democrats. It's from one extreme to the other. Speaking of extremes, here's Captain Extreme himself with some of his January the 6th commemoration remarks.
What did we not see? We didn't see a former president who had just rallied the mob to attack, sitting in the private dining room off the Oval Office in the White House, watching it all on television and doing nothing for hours as police were assaulted, lives at risk, the nation's capital under siege.
What we didn't see was we didn't see him, hanging out in the dining room and then watching reruns of Matlock and
Look, I'm going to say this again because I do not want to be accused of downplaying January the 6th. It was a horrible day, full of terrible imagery. Nothing like this should have happened and should never happen again. But if you think for 1 minute, for 1 millisecond, that as long as Democrats are getting shellacked in the polls, they're going to let this thing go, then you are living in Fantasyland. Case in point, the editorial board over at the New York Times put out an article last week entitled, "Every Day is January the 6th now. Dun, dun, dun." And this is what it says. 1 year after the smoke and broken glass, the mock gallows, and the very real bloodshed of that awful day, it is tempting to look back and imagine that we can, in fact, simply look back. To imagine that what happened on January the 6th, 2021, a deadly riot at the seat of American government, incited by a defeated president amid a last-ditch effort to thwart the transfer of power to his successor, was horrifying, but that it is in the past and that we as a nation should have moved on. This is an understandable impulse. After 4 years of chaos, cruelty, and incompetence, culminating in a pandemic and the once unthinkable trauma of January 6th, most Americans were desperate for some peace and quiet. On the surface, we have achieved that. Our political life seems more or less normal these days, really, as the president pardons turkeys and Congress quarrels over spending bills. I love the simplification of everything that's going on. But peel back a layer and things are far from normal. January the 6th is not in the past. It is every day. It is regular citizens who threaten election officials and other public servants who ask, when can we use the guns? And who vow to murder politicians who dare to vote their conscience. Funny, because I believe one of Bernie Sanders' supporters tried to kill Congress people several years ago. It is Republican lawmakers scrambling to make it harder for people to vote and easier to subvert their will if they do. All right. January 6th is every day, guys. Every single day is January the 6th. It's like Groundhog Day from, Bill Murray waking up every day, and it's January 6th. You see, when you've been defeated on nearly every legislative front that exists without ramrodding it through unilaterally with executive order or congressional reconciliation, then your next play that you go to is to exploit that which can be exploited. January the 6th. Voting laws, which in no way, form, or fashion prevent people from going to the polls. The last election, more Americans, black, white, yet red, yellow, purple, voted in the election. There was no voter suppression. But as long as this is a talking point that can be exploited, that's what they're going to do, because they know they can't get any real legislation pushed through because people in their own party, like Joe Manchin, think it is garbage. Joe Biden has absolutely dropped the ball on every aspect of his presidency, except maybe filling us in on the latest rerun of the Donna Reed show. COVID, disastrous, which we'll talk about in a minute. Foreign policy, embarrassment. And the economy, unmitigated nightmare. But hold on to your britches, because according to Joe Biden, guys, the economy is doing great.
To begin, I want to say a word about where our economy stands today. We're entering 2022 in a position of a unique economic strength. 6 million new jobs, a record number for a new president, have been created since January last. Unemployment is down to 4.2%, 3 years ahead of predictions. New small business applications are up over 30% compared with before the pandemic, and the fastest growth in America in nearly 40 years.
Really? So which alternate dimension have you been transported to, Joe? Which one? Seriously, I want to go there. I want to go there and live, because the reality I live in is one where gas, clothing, and especially food is higher. But remember, guys, according to the president, your meat being more expensive at the grocery store has nothing to do with supply chain issues or inflation. It's because of corporate greed.
Big corporations control more than half of the markets in beef, pork, and poultry. These middlemen that they buy from, farmers and ranchers, and sell the processors, sell the processed product to grocery stores. That's the way it works. Without meaningful competition, farmers and ranchers don't get to choose who they sell to. Or put another way, our farmers and ranchers have to pay whatever these 4 big companies say they have to pay, by and large.
Wow, that's funny, because when I look at meat prices, they're 12% higher than they were in October of 2020. And beef is 20% higher. So I have a question. Why was it that unmitigated greed raping us at the meat counter before? Huh? Here's a revolutionary thought. Maybe it's not the greed of companies, but the inept policies of a failed administration who shuts down oil lines when we're energy independent, or has a Secretary of Transportation who takes a 2-month paternity leave while there's a supply chain shortage Or maybe it's from creating constant COVID fear. I don't know. Maybe these have something to do with the fact that prices are rising and less to do with corporate greed. Corporate, COVID fear, which keeps people from working, thus exacerbating a labor shortage. Maybe that's the reason for increase in prices and inflation. And if you don't think Democrats know this, then you greatly underestimate them. And that knowledge of just how subpar their performance has been and the butt whipping awaiting in November is precisely why talking points like January the 6th and voter suppression will be talking points from now until the midterms. Listen, guys, I officiated high school and college and even professional sports for many years. And when a coach or a player knows they have no chance at beating the other team or the other player, if they know they have no chance of winning, then their ire is turned to the refs. And this is exactly the game plan that the Democrats are utilizing, because they know they have nothing going on, nothing good going on into this year's midterms. They know that they are the party in power, and everyone is looking to them, asking the question, well, if you control Congress, if you control the presidency, then why have you flubbed on every level? And they don't have an answer. They know they have a president and a vice president whose combined poll numbers don't amount to the IQ of an orangutan. Look it up. It's actually correct. And so we get January the 6th ad nauseum along with COVID, which we'll talk about in just a moment, because it's an absolute crap show. But I do have a very important question to ask you first, and that is, are you tired of establishment media only providing you one side of the story? Ready for a fresh new perspective with hard-hitting facts and truth spliced with humor and sarcastic wit through a conservative lens? Then you've come to the right place. Coast to Coast, the conservative podcast, is available on all major podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. You can also check us out online at coasttocoast.buzzsprout.com. That's COAST, the number 2, COAST.buzzsprout.com. And we'll also be coming to YouTube, very shortly. Please subscribe today. So if you've ever seen the dystopian TV series Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, you'll understand what I'm about to talk about. If you haven't, don't worry, I'll spare you having to watch the show. On Handmaid's Tale, a theocratic organization known as the Sons of Jacob have taken over the United States and transformed it into a militant Christian state called the Republic of Gilead. And many of the high-ranking members of this organization, called commanders, who are supposed to be paragons of chastity and virtue, well, they like to frequent this place called Jezebel's, which is a house of ill repute. Well, for so long, Democrats have been saying that Florida is a state of ill repute, filled with anti-vax, simpleton COVID deniers who are led by the most sinister of all brothelesque administrators, Ron DeSantis. How could anyone want to move to such a heinous place filled with such immoral, unsophisticated, unscrupulous ruffians and lowlifes such as Florida? And then they all come and vacation down here. So this week, the inestimable Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decided that she was going to visit Jezebel's. Yes, the laudable and so righteous Congresswoman was going to visit the horrible, terrible, no good, very bad state of Florida. And of course, it wouldn't be a week in the life of AOC, Instagram and Twitter celebrity extraordinaire, without some self-aggrandizing PR. So she goes on Twitter and tweets out this.
If Republicans are mad that they can't date me, they can just say that instead of projecting their sexual frustrations onto my boyfriend's feet, you creepy weirdos.
That's what it is. I've been trying to put my finger on it, but AOC has illuminated me with her brilliant wisdom, her sagacity from on high. All of us Republican men secretly want to have sex with her. We are suppressing our secret carnal desires for the annoying human chatty Cathy doll, otherwise known as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-stupidity. Or could it be that, I don't know, we look at you as a colossal hypocrite for living it up in the very place which you constantly chastise as a den of evil? I'm in Florida right now, and boy, is it a great state. People living their lives, no snow, sunshine, happiness. Unfortunately, I'm here to be with my stepfather, who's been hospitalized for the past week. So the other day, I asked the nurses in the hospital, I said, are you guys overwhelmed with COVID? Her response, nope. But remember, guys, we've been led to believe that Florida is at the forefront of COVID because the evil Ron DeSantis is killing his citizens. And that's been the talking point of the left for so long, especially for people like AOC. Speaking of Ron DeSantis, it wasn't enough for AOC to come down here and tarnish Florida with her presence. She has the audacity to also tweet out this.
Hasn't Governor DeSantis been inexplicably missing for like 2 weeks? If he's around, I'd be happy to say hello. Please don't. His social media team seems to have been posting old photos for weeks. In the meantime, perhaps I can help with local organizing. Folks are quite receptive here. Well, the folks that are quite receptive here are probably from New York and New Jersey and won't leave their politics behind. And by the way, please don't come down here and change or do anything. Florida is just fine without you, okay? In fact, why don't you just take the first plane back to New York and let the good people of Florida live how they want to live. And by the way, asshat extraordinaire AOC, the reason that Ron DeSantis was not seen is not due to him being on vacation. It's due to him caring for his sick wife who has breast cancer. But can you imagine the fallout if a Republican had said that about a Democrat who was caring for a spouse with cancer? It would have been front page news at the New York Times and Post for weeks on end. Look at the cruelty and insensitivity of those hate-filled Republicans. Honestly, folks, these are the people you want to give more control to over your lives? A president who can't slap together a coherent sentence and a congresswoman who is the embodiment of hypocrisy and uncouth cruelty? If that's what you want, then go for it and live in your lockdown states of misery while the rest of us soak up the rays in the Sunshine State and Texas and other states of freedom, where, by the way, the economies are all booming. And the left is finally starting to awaken from their mental slumber about this. They know their blue states suck and have become Attica-like hellholes that no one wants to live in anymore, which is why real estate prices in Florida are skyrocketing right now because everyone wants to move here. Here's Chris Hayes stating the obvious about Omicron, something we've been saying for 2 years.
Who are vaccinated, particularly those who are boosted, the personal risk of being exposed to this went from something that we hadn't really dealt with specifically like this before in our lifetimes. We hadn't quite had an illness this infectious and this possible to cause serious illness to something that does look more like the flu.
Oh my God. I mean, did a brain suddenly form in the intracranial cavity of Chris Hayes' skull in the past week? Even the NCAA finally came out and said they're going to recognize natural immunity as being equal with vaccination. I mean, wow, IQs have just suddenly perked up on the scale. Or maybe it's because everyone is realizing that perseverating upon these asinine COVID policies are going to lead to their demise, specifically Democrats. And the monster they've created in fear-mongering is not going away. Even The Atlantic, which is by no means a conservative publication, ran an article this week about unnecessary COVID testing, something I've been talking about. This from Benjamin Mazer over at The Atlantic. He says, move over mimosas because America has a fresh New Year's tradition, struggling to get tested for COVID before returning to school or work. The line for brunch was replaced last weekend with line after line after line of weary citizens waiting to receive their viral clearance. Testing backlogs are only going to get worse from here as case numbers continue their ascent. But amid the complaints about a lack of rapid testing kits and long delays for lab results, I'm reminded of the adage, you are not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Yes, the system failed us. Inadequate public investment in the nation's testing infrastructure has worsened the congestion, but we can help ease it too and clear the way for those who have the greatest need for their results by staying off the road whenever possible.
It's possible to feel outrage at this state of affairs while behaving as responsibly as possible given the circumstances. This is the testing version of vaccine equity, the effort to ensure that life-saving inoculations don't disproportionately benefit the healthiest and wealthiest. When the same principle is applied to diagnostics, it means that people at the lowest level for COVID shouldn't buy up large stocks of at-home tests or grab PCR appointments when they're not experiencing symptoms. And he's absolutely correct. I swear at this point, some people just love being scared, like people who love watching apocalyptic movies about the end of the world. I have a question. Why are people, other than unvaccinated and those required to do so for work or school, going out and getting COVID tests when they are asymptomatic? Seriously, why? Other than for an STD, when in your life, and I hope you haven't had to even do that, but when in your life have you ever gone out and gotten a test when you show no signs or symptoms of a disease? Everyone needs to understand an immutable, irrevocable truth about Omicron. You're getting it. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but it cometh for you, and guess what? There's not a damn thing you can do about it except get vaccinated. And if you've done that already, then what else can you do? I'll tell you what, absolutely nothing. I don't need a PhD from Harvard or an MD from Yale behind my name to tell you that because I have something called a functioning brain. If you're vaccinated and you get Omicron, there's nothing you can do about it. But here's the good news. It's only 20% as deadly as Delta, which puts it on the same level as, and I know it's verboten to say, on the same level as the flu. And we conservatives are constantly slammed for comparing COVID to flu. But now it is a statistical fact that Omicron is as deadly as the flu. And that's good news. So take a deep breath and stop freaking out. But while the masses are gripped with fear, there are those who won't let it go, and for no other reason than opportunity. So this week in Chicago, as you probably well know, the teachers union said that they weren't going back to school. And for the third day now, the entire educational apparatus has been effectively shut down in Chicago because the teachers think they call the shots now. Even Randy Weingarten, the Garbaggio president of the American Federation of Teachers, is jumping in on the action.
Newsom did in California is really the best model, which is that the semester after they go from emergency use to full authorization, and the FDA has done everything that they need to do. That's what California has said. That is the semester that they become mandatory. But I personally support that. The union hasn't taken a position on that.
So she's all for mandating vaccinations, and here's the problem. They tried doing that in Los Angeles. The LA Unified School District, which we reported on several weeks ago, tried doing it, and it was a colossal CF, if you know what a CF is, a cluster bleep. They had 30,000 kids that weren't vaccinated and that could not start school in January. And so instead of putting 30,000 kids into online learning, which would have been disastrous, they had to keep the schools open. Mandatory testing and vaccination for kids, especially young children, it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and you're going to have this all over the country. Well, I can tell you other places in the country where they actually believe in science and rational thought, states like Arizona, are not putting up with this crap. This from the editorial board over at the Wall Street Journal. The political scandal of the year so far is unfolding in plain sight in Chicago, where the teachers union has effectively shut down the public schools. Will this finally cause President Biden to speak up for children? Probably not. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey is showing the way. Chicago schools were supposed to open Wednesday, but they shut down after the Chicago Teachers Union voted against in-person learning. The Teachers Union says it won't relent until the surge in COVID-19 cases has subsided. So basically, they're never going to go back. They're never, because there's going to be a surge, as we've talked about before, year after year, because it's an endemic virus. It goes on to say, or the school district signs an agreement, quote unquote, establishing conditions for return, approved by the CTU.
Even Mayor Lori Lightfoot is unhappy, correctly noting that Chicago's classrooms are safe and accusing the union of an illegal work stoppage. Well, okay, I praise her for at least putting up some fight, but she capitulated too. They've been closed for 3 days in a row. So before you herald Lori Lightfoot as as someone actually taking now a more rational, non-provocative stance, don't be so quick to do, because she is far from laudable in her actions. She added that teachers who didn't show up Wednesday would be put on no pay status. Okay, we'll see if that happens. We'll see how long that lasts, given how powerful the CTU is in Democratic politics. I mean, and the article's 100% correct. On CBS's Face the Nation this weekend, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona also emphasized that schools can be opened safely. Oh my God. Miguel Cardona finally growing a brain. We know what works, he said, and I believe even with Omicron, our default should be in-person learning for all students across the country. Wow. The contrast couldn't be greater in Arizona, where Governor Ducey on Tuesday announced the Open for Learning Recovery Benefit. The program offers parents $7,000 in education-related aid if their child's school shuts down. If a school closes for even a day, families who meet the income requirements can apply for funds that can be used for school-coordinated transportation, online tutoring, approved child care, and most important, tuition. This effectively makes it a voucher. Well, good for Governor Ducey. We finally are using public monies for school vouchers, something that we as conservatives have talked about for a very, very, very long time. And honestly, I hope that this crap continues, for the simple reason that now more states, I think, will fall in line with Arizona and give parents and students a choice about where they want to go for school, and not be effectively enslaved by these just lazy, lackadaisical, self-centered hypocrites, aka Chicago school teachers. And if teachers want to play these games, then give them their walking papers. Seriously, give them their walking papers. I understand it can't be done all at once, but if they're going to play these games with children as pawns, the very people they claim to care so much about, then send them packing and bring in teachers who are willing to teach in person. Grow a spine and do it. Speaking of growing a spine, when is Hollywood ever going to tell the woke mafia to shove it where the sun don't shine? Seriously. Now, I will be the first to admit that award shows, for the most part, are a colossal waste of time. They are an opportunity for celebrities to kind of get together and pat themselves on the back and tell themselves they're all masters of the universe while they get like $10,000 gift bags. They're a waste of time. I get it. And quite honestly, no one watches them anymore. But I am a movie lover. I love cinema, and I think there is some merit to recognizing film as an art form in our society. You may recall that back in May, NBC decided that it was going to cancel the Golden Globes because the Hollywood Foreign Press had no black members. Obviously, this is coming to the forefront of our news cycle now because the Golden Globes were supposed to be taking place this week. And the awards will be given out, but not on television, with no audience and no celebrities. Even Tom Cruise, the Pope of Scientology and all-around just idiot, said he was sending his Golden Globes back. Well, that's fine. Let him send them back. So the question you're asking, well, why does this even merit discussion on the podcast? Well, it merits discussion because along with two other stories, which I'm about to discuss, we see that the woke mafia is taking out hits on everyone continuously. Remember, for whom does cancellation cometh? It cometh for thee. You have probably heard the story that Patton Oswalt, comedian and actor, was lambasted over social media by the trans community for posing in a photo with fellow comedian and friend of 34 years, Dave Chappelle. Why? Well, because now Dave Chappelle is apparently a bigot for saying that men and women as genders actually exist. And because Patton Oswalt was in a picture with him, because he even was within a 50-yard radius of Dave Chappelle, he is a terrible, no good, very bad person. And quite honestly, the fact that he even capitulates to this on Twitter proves that he is a spineless, weak little man. This is what he had to tweet out this week in response to the attacks he got from the trans community. This is very long, and I'm not going to read the entire tweet, but he says, I saw a friend I hadn't seen in a long time this New Year's Eve. We've known each other since we were teens. He's a fellow comedian, the funniest I've ever met. I wanted to post a pic and an IG story about it, so I did. The friend is Dave Chappelle. Dun, dun, dun. 34 years, we've been friends. He's refocused and refined ideas a lot of us took as settled about race and history and life on planet Earth and spun them around with a phrase or punchline. I'm Rick James. We've done bad and good gigs, open mics, and TV tapings, but we also 100% disagree about transgender rights and representation. I support trans people's rights, all caps, anyone's rights to live safely in the world as their fullest selves. For all the things he's helped me evolve on, I've always disagreed with him where he stands now on transgender issues. But I also don't believe a seeker like him is done evolving and learning. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So the problem with the woke left and why I'm talking about this to wind up the show today is because people on the left, specifically members of the woke tribe, are like religious proselytizers. You have to go out and you have to convert all of your friends to the enlightenment of wokeism. And if you don't succeed in converting them, then unfortunately they become unpeople. They are cast out of the flock into the darkness where there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. It is verboten to say that a transgender swimmer at Penn has an unfair advantage for being a biological male up until 2019, and when he decided to switch genders and be allowed to compete against women, he's broken all kinds of swimming records. But if you question a level playing field, like so many have, then you're, wait for it, a bigot. I mean, I guess golf courses are bigoted since they have women's tees. And what if this transgender athlete breaks all of Katie Ledecky's records? Seriously, does that make this swimmer the greatest female swimmer of all time? How is that fair to athletes like Ledecky, who have dedicated their entire lives to being the best, only to have it potentially snatched away because we're too afraid to question the absurdity of letting men compete against women? Honestly, how is it any different from doping? The New York Post even asked that question, but again, presenting such logical questions makes you transphobic. Like Dave Chappelle, simply saying that there are men and women, and Patton Oswalt has to lay himself upon the altar of the woke high priesthood. It just does not end. But it really brings us to a larger existential issue as a society, which is why can't conservatives, or people for that matter, forget about just conservatives, why can't we question things any longer? Just the other day, I was sitting in my stepfather's hospital room, which he was sharing with another gentleman. And of course, there was a curtain between them. And he and his family, the gentleman beside my stepfather, he and his family were engaged in a discussion about Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, coming under attack for saying he wants to piss off the unvaccinated. And they said, good, I wish we would do the same in this country. Now, I want to start off by saying they have every right to feel that way. It's a free country. But what came out of their mouths next is where I draw the line. They said that they wished insurance companies wouldn't insure the unvaccinated and would discriminate against them. And that goes beyond politics. That's just plain cruel. When we have decided as a nation that we literally wish harm and comeuppance in the form of death to be visited upon our neighbors whose politics and ideologies differ from our own, then we are doomed. I have no problem with people disagreeing with me. Hell, I welcome it. But I wish no person to befall harm or death because of a political viewpoint or decision they've made relating to their own personal health. Civility has been completely lost by the left, and COVID has been the litmus test by which their unvirtuousness is revealed. I constantly hear Democrats say, I mean, it's to the point where it's sickening. We are the party of the people. They say, they reiterate, we care about the little man. Well, I'm really starting to wonder if it's just their little men they care about, or is it all little men? And think not for 1 second that conservatives don't see the animosity hurled their way, the complete lack of basic human decency, which is constantly thrown in their face. The left has become like a pagan religion of old, where denial of the God's existence meant you were subjected to punishment and doom. As a religious person, my holy text, the Torah, teaches me that I should care about all people, even those that hate me. So if the left is going to embrace this paganistic COVID cult of hatred, then the pushback will come. And as it did for cults of old, they will eventually be no more. And it's not going to take very long. It's only going to take about 10 months. Well, that's all we have for today. We'll see you again next week. I am Jon Cohen, and this has been Coast to Coast, the Conservative Podcast. Thank you, everyone.